So it's now official. Tyson Fury will fight Francis Ngannou in a boxing match on October 28th in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. The event will be promoted by Gimmick Fight Promotions, Riyadh Season, Queensbury Promotions, and Top Rank. Skill Challenge, the outfit headed up by Prince Khalid that have done all the big boxing events previously, are not involved in this fight, just in case there's any confusion. Now, if Tyson Fury had already fought and beat Alexander Usyk and all the current top heavyweight contenders, I wouldn't actually have an issue with this fight against Francis Ngannou. It would be like when Muhammad Ali fought that Japanese wrestler towards the end of his career after he'd already beaten George Foreman, Joe Frazier, Ken Norton, Ron Lyle, Sonny Liston, and all the others. He didn't fight that wrestler instead of fighting those guys. He fought him in addition to fighting those guys. It was part of Ali's victory lap after he'd already cleaned out the division and become undisputed. But with Tyson Fury, it's the opposite. He isn't fighting Ngannou after fighting Usyk. He's fighting Ngannou instead of fighting Usyk. Tyson Fury is the unbeaten WBC World Heavyweight Champion. Despite Usyk having more belts, Fury's a bigger name. He's more famous. He is the face of heavyweight boxing that the entire world sees. In the lower weight classes, fighters like Devin Haney, Terence Crawford, Errol Spence, Jamel Charlo, Canelo Alvarez, and Alexander Usyk have all put boxing in a good light by partaking in undisputed fights in recent years in their respective weight classes. Yet with Tyson Fury, rather than following in their footsteps by fighting Usyk for undisputed at heavyweight, he instead decides to duck that fight and take on an MMA fighter instead. With the assistance of the WBC, who are aiding and abetting him, Tyson Fury is trashing the reputation of the heavyweight division. Jake Paul is just a YouTuber. He has no amateur background in boxing whatsoever. He's a complete novice, but he gets widely criticized for taking on MMA fighters. Yet now we have Tyson Fury, the WBC World Heavyweight Champion, a man who's been boxing since he was a child, doing the exact same thing. When you hear me saying that Tyson Fury should go and fight on Misfits cards with his brother Tommy, you think I'm being facetious. I'm not. I'm being 100% deadly serious. This is the realm that Tyson Fury has chosen to be part of now. Bricktop, Mauricio Sulaiman, and various other disingenuous characters connected to Tyson Fury want you to believe the lie that Fury has no choice but to take on Ngannou because none of the top heavyweights in boxing will fight him. This is so contrary to the blatant and obvious truth that it could only be described as gaslighting. Usyk tried to fight Fury last year and this year, but Fury ducked him twice. In the wake of that, a number of contenders have offered to face Tyson Fury. Frank Sanchez and Martin Bakole, just to name two. But Fury has chosen to pass on those guys as well, both of whom would make mincemeat of Francis Ngannou in a boxing ring. In a further attempt to stave off public backlash, Team Fury have now tried to divert criticism towards thrice-beaten ex-champion Anthony Joshua. Oh, look who Joshua's fighting. Don't blame Fury, blame AJ. That would be like Terence Crawford ducking Errol Spence twice and then saying, well, what about Ugas? Who's he fighting? I don't see you criticizing him. That is literally what Team Fury are doing now by pointing the finger at Anthony Joshua. Joshua is not in the heavyweight title picture. He's not a champion. He's not even a mandatory. Fury should be focusing on the man who beat Joshua twice, Alexander Usyk. That's the fight that needs to happen, but no, Fury doesn't want that fight right now. And he's using Anthony Joshua to deflect criticism away from himself ducking the Usyk fight. That's how ridiculous his excuses are now. Let me give you an analogy. Let's say there's a guy who works in a senior position within a major corporation, and he's been asked to meet with a client to complete a multi-million-dollar deal, but he fails to turn up for the meeting, and the deal doesn't go through. Maybe he was out partying the night before and didn't hear his alarm or whatever. When he goes back to work, he gets summoned before the board of directors to explain his actions, but he offers no apology. He offers no explanation. Instead, he turns around and says, well, there's a guy who works in the call center who was off sick for 3 days last week, and the girl who works on reception uses her phone when no one's looking, but I don't see you picking on them. Now, obviously, they're gonna look at this guy and say, what brand of crack are you smoking? You hold a senior position within this company. You just messed up a multi-million-dollar deal, and you're trying to compare that to some guy in the call center who took off sick? Are you nuts? Your actions have a far greater impact on the company than his actions, obviously. Yet you've got the audacity to stand there and try and use him as a deflection. Your role comes with a lot of power, but with power comes responsibility. If you're not comfortable with that level of responsibility and you don't want to be subject to any more scrutiny than a receptionist, then go and work on reception. That example is exactly what Team Fury are doing right now, attempting to deflect blame away from themselves. And I'll tell them the same thing the board of directors told that guy in the example I just gave. If you don't like the expectations and responsibilities that come with being world heavyweight champion, then give up the belt and stop calling yourself champion. Then you can go off, just like Floyd Mayweather did, and fight as many mixed martial artists, kickboxers, and YouTubers as you please. No problem at all. But as long as you've got that WBC belt, and you're not only calling yourself the best of your generation, but the greatest of all time, then you will be held to that standard. And right now, you are falling a long way short of it. The criticism you're receiving is due to your own actions. You're disrespecting the fans who put money in your pocket. You and Frank Warren are selling us snake oil. That's what you're doing. Now let's address the elephant in the living room. Fighting Francis Ngannou was Tyson Fury's plan all along. He never had any intention whatsoever of fighting Alexander Usyk. We know that bit. But the plan wasn't just to duck Usyk. It was to then fight Francis Ngannou instead. That was the plan from the very start. This is absolutely crystal clear to me, especially now with the benefit of hindsight. That's why during the negotiations for the Usyk fight, Tyson and his dad John kept talking about Francis Ngannou. John Fury actually had the audacity to claim that Ngannou had a better chance of beating Tyson than Usyk does. If you're negotiating for the undisputed heavyweight title, why would you keep talking about fighting an MMA guy who's never had a pro boxing match in his life? They were laying the groundwork for the Ngannou fight right from the very beginning. However, Tyson Fury knew that Usyk was desperate to fight him, and that if he openly turned Usyk down, his credibility would be ruined. So instead, he planned to shake Usyk off by constantly moving the goalposts and making ever more ridiculous demands. By November last year, the teams of both Usyk and Fury had agreed that the fight would have to take place by early March 2023 at the latest because of Ramadan and Usyk's pending mandatories. With that deadline in mind, Fury made his first attempt to shake Usyk off in the post-fight interview he did in the ring after the Chisora fight. He claimed that he was injured and required surgery and would need 6 to 8 weeks after surgery to heal. That time frame would obviously conflict with the deadline for the fight, but you can't make a prognosis like that without being thoroughly examined or having a scan, which means that he must have been injured and diagnosed before the fight, in which case why would you fight Derek Chisora at all and risk scuppering the Usyk match? It makes absolutely no sense. So that was the first red flag that I noticed and pointed out at the time during that particular round of negotiations. Fury was looking for a way out, but he didn't manage to deter Usyk. Usyk's team worked hard to convince the IBF, the WBA, and the WBO to extend the deadline. Usyk and Fury were negotiating their own individual deals for the fight with the Saudis. Usyk accepted the deal the Saudis offered him. He was very happy with it. Did Tyson Fury also accept his own deal? No, of course not. He dragged negotiations with the Saudis out for as long as he possibly could, hoping that Usyk would be ordered to face one of his mandatories, at which point the undisputed fight would have to be called off. But that didn't happen. Usyk managed to hold his mandatories at bay. So Fury then rejected the Saudi deal outright. I suspect that Fury thought that would be enough to finally shake Usyk off, because a fight at Wembley would pay both of them far less money. I reckon he thought Usyk would never accept such a massive and completely unnecessary pay cut, at which point Fury could then move on to fight Francis Ngannou in summer. But to his surprise, Usyk still wouldn't walk away. He kept pursuing him, calling him out on social media. And remember, up until this point, Tyson Fury had been uncharacteristically quiet. But once he realized that Usyk was going to continue pursuing him, he started to get frustrated. He wants to go off and fight Ngannou for an absolute fortune, but Usyk just won't leave him alone. Usyk's messing up his plans. But the WBA finally ran out of patience and issued a final deadline, after which which Usyk must fight Daniel Dubois. That's when Fury finally breaks his silence and makes that video demanding 70-30, moves the goalposts on the rematch clause and so on. He could finally see the exit, so he started throwing all this nonsense out there just to kill the last few seconds on the clock and attempt to muddy the waters. Frank Warren would later claim that the reason Fury rejected the Saudi deal was because the Saudis didn't have a venue big enough to host the fight and they'd need to wait for the construction of a new stadium in the summer. This is obviously complete and utter nonsense. If there was no suitable venue, then why did Usyk accept his deal with the Saudis? The reality is, there are numerous venues in Saudi Arabia that could have accommodated the fight comfortably. No problem at all. For the Joshua Ruiz rematch, the Saudis constructed an outdoor arena in a matter of weeks. If you count from the start of the Usyk-Fury negotiations, there was more than enough time to do exactly the same. Fury is rumored to have demanded something like $120 million from the Saudis for the Usyk fight, which the Saudis were not willing to pay. Perhaps they told Fury, the only way we would be willing to pay you that amount is if we made a sufficient amount of money back in ticket sales. But that would not be possible in the arenas we currently have. That would require a giant stadium, and we won't have anything like that built until summer. I suspect that is what Frank Warren has derived this laughable excuse from. The reality is, Fury could have accepted the offer from the Saudis in February, got paid $60 million or whatever they were offering him, and had the fight with Usyk in April in a 15,000-seat arena, just like AJ did against Ruiz and Usyk. Usyk was willing to do that. He signed up for it, but Tyson Fury refused. He priced himself out with the Saudis and then priced himself out with Usyk once the fight was moved to Wembley because he never wanted the Usyk fight. His plan was to fight Francis Ngannou right from the very start. This is why, when the four-man heavyweight tournament in Saudi Arabia was first proposed, Usyk, Joshua, and Wilder immediately confirmed their interest in it, but Fury dismissed it. This was many, many months ago, and Skill Challenge obviously found out within the past few weeks that Fury was going to fight Ngannou in October in collaboration with a different Saudi promotional company, in which case, making Fury a new offer to fight Usyk in December became pointless. He's getting paid just as much, if not more, for a much easier fight. Tyson Fury once famously turned up to a press conference dressed as Batman. It seemed very appropriate because after he beat Klitschko, he was seen by many, including myself at the time, as the savior of the heavyweight division. But to paraphrase Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight, you either retire a hero or fight on long enough to see yourself become the villain. So looking back now, it's clear. Tyson Fury was never Batman. He isn't even the Joker. He's Harvey Two-Face. Are you sick and tired of the mainstream mindset? Does the dogmatic conformity and pathological ignorance have you tearing your hair out in frustration? Then don't be alone. Come and join our brotherhood on Patreon. We stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. You'll gain access to my weekly topical podcast where we take more deep dives than Jacques Cousteau on an endless variety of subjects. There's also videos, interviews, live Q&As, as well as a vast back catalogue of previous episodes, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen via the Patreon app or download in high-quality MP3. Connect with myself and hundreds of other members in our Element chat group. There's no contract, no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a Mickey D's McMuffin. Just head to my Patreon page via the link below this video and select the tier called the Brotherhood of Reason. I'll see you over there.